Before anyone was concerned about the three-body problem, the entire world was focused on the year 2000 problem, when a seemingly insignificant computing glitch threatened to cripple civilization. No, seriously. While the problem was widely misunderstood and mostly overstated, the fear was very real, and plenty of people were more than a little freaked out. So, today we're turning back the clock to why everyone was so worried about Y2K. But before we go back to the dawn of a new millennium, why not hit that subscribe button? Then head down to the comments and let us know how you would deck out your apocalypse bunker. Okay, tonight we're gonna party like it's 1999. The story of Y2K actually starts several decades earlier, at the dawn of the computer age. In the 1950s and 60s, computers were not only much slower than they are today, but much bigger, taking up entire rooms. These machines used punch cards with a fixed limit of 80 characters to store data, so efficiency with programs was extremely important. One trick coders developed was shortening dates by removing the first two numbers of the four-digit year. So 1970 became simply 70, thus saving 2 columns of spaces on a punch card. However, an obvious problem arises once the date turns over from 1999 to 2000. Now, a 2-digit combo could mean a date in the 1900s or the 2000s, and the system is unable to distinguish between the two. Furthermore, the computer's expression of the date September 9, 1999 would be 9999, which is also the shorthand used to indicate that no date is available. A few technologists here and there recognized this might eventually be a problem, but they received little attention outside niche circles until the 1980s, when Wall Street brokers began running into trouble writing bonds that matured after the year 2000. By 1987, the New York Stock Exchange was already spending millions on programmers to update its computer systems, so they'd understand 4-digit dates in the future. In 1993, the magazine Computer World ran an article titled Doomsday 2000, warning about the potential crisis when every computer would get confused about the date all at once. In 1998, President Bill Clinton formed a Council on Year 2000 Conversion to oversee the government's efforts to prevent a widespread crisis and set the public's mind at ease. Obviously, that last part didn't work out so well. The Y2K problem was never a doomsday scenario, but it also wasn't a case of people getting all worked up over nothing. There were a variety of practical concerns and vital systems that really did require focused and effective updates prior to the 2000 switchover. By the late 1990s, the world of computing had progressed exponentially beyond its origins in the 50s and 60s. And with so much more complexity and so many more programming languages, there was no one-size-fits-all solution for the millennium bug. Individual systems would have to bring in their own teams to sort it out for themselves. Businesses and government agencies each created in-house teams of programmers that checked every internal system relying on dates. In situations where problematic hardware or software couldn't be replaced, they went about the time-consuming work of rewriting bad code and removing outdated chips. For example, the Social Security Administration uses calculations based on dates to determine and distribute benefits. If the system can't tell whether a person was born in 1934 or 2034, that person might not receive the funds they need. So this system had to be entirely reworked for the new dating method. The Federal Aviation Administration also realized that their air traffic control systems could be impacted and spent around $400 million over the course of 4 years on a variety of contingency plans. And banks faced a whole score of Y2K-themed problems, particularly in terms of daily interest rate calculations. Although, let's be honest, if everybody's loan rates got reset, nobody but the banks would be too broken up about it. Thanks to Ground News for sponsoring today's video. Now, more than ever, the ability to filter through the chaos of traditional news media is an absolute necessity. With so many different sources of around-the-clock news available to us, it can be hard to tell whether a particular story is giving you the whole story. Ground News compiles stories from across the political spectrum, globally and locally, giving you every angle so you get the full picture you need to stay ahead of potential media bias. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the number of articles covering it and the political bias, ownership, and headlines of the sources reporting it. Simply check the article's coverage details to find specific breakdowns of where the story is being reported and how often. as well as the political lean of the sources and their respective ownership, based on ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. Ground News also makes it easy to compare headlines to see how different news outlets are framing the issue, providing you a complete and unbiased view of every story. Ground News is an independently owned service, not a news publisher, so it is able to provide you a rundown of news from sources around the world, all in one place, and allow you to compare coverage to think critically about the information we consume. So get the big picture with Ground News. Go to ground.news/weird history and subscribe for 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan this month only, and help support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape a more transparent place. Now, back to the video. While the actual work of sorting out the problem went on behind the scenes, rampant media coverage generated some hysteria. News articles warned of zombie computer systems that would infect one another with the Y2K bug, causing global networks to suddenly crash. Books like Michael Hyatt's The Millennium Bug: How to Survive the Coming Chaos warned that hospitals were entirely computerized, so Y2K was going to shut down patients' infusion pumps and heart monitors. Some people withdrew their life savings because of a rumor that ATMs were all going to fail on January 1st at midnight. Around 25% fewer flights than normal were booked for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, as travelers waited to see whether or not planes were going to fall from the skies at the stroke of midnight. Hey, more legroom for us. A lot of these worst-case scenario predictions were based on faulty information or assumptions. Several warnings relied on pre-Y2K stress tests that determined computer systems were seriously unprepared for the date changeover and could potentially crash entirely. But these stress tests were almost certainly apocryphal. Most concerns about hardware devices failing on Y2K were baseless, as these devices largely rely on chips that measured time in second intervals and didn't use conventional date formats. As author Jeffrey James later pointed out, the notion of cascading failures in which faulty systems interact with and crash other systems because of faulty dates were entirely unfounded. In fact, it now appears the most significant dangers associated with Y2K were related to the skittishness it triggered among the population, rather than the technological issue itself. President Clinton's counsel warned that the greatest danger America faced was from the hoarding of vital supplies by consumers, who assumed they'd no longer have access to grocery stores or pharmacies. Clinton's Y2K czar, John Koskinen, went so far as to arrange a flight to New York that would have him in midair during the turnover from December 31st to January 1st, just to prove to the public that he wasn't personally worried. Meanwhile, Clinton's Energy Secretary Bill Richardson warned motorists not to stockpile gasoline, because storing a lot of gasoline around your house is way more dangerous than any millennium bug. Well, sure, unless the bug is also hoarding gasoline. While FEMA, as always, encouraged people to create a disaster preparedness kit, they cautioned against hoarding excess supplies, recommending Americans prepare merely for a long weekend and brief power outage, not decades in a bunker following society-wide collapse. The Canadian Pharmacists Association warned members specifically about the dangers of medical stockpiling, which would create a drug shortage more dangerous than a computer bug. As you may have guessed, technology and civilization both survived the turnover from 1999 to 2000. And the Y2K bug did not cause a massive shutdown of essential services. But that's not to say there was no impact at all. Globally, a lot of little bugs and glitches were reported. Radiation monitoring equipment at the Japanese Shiga nuclear power plant failed a few seconds after midnight, though backup systems ensured no radiation leaked out. Some prison doors in Canada failed, along with power plants in Eastern Europe and dialysis machines in East Africa. In Greece, around 30,000 cash registers started producing inaccurate receipts. The first baby of the new millennium in Denmark has January 1st, 1900 on their birth certificate. No, that's a curious case of Benjamin Button. In the US, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms didn't register any new firearm dealers for 5 days because of a glitch in their application process. Around 500 Philadelphia residents received jury duty summons telling them to come to court in the year 1900. They'd probably still find a way to blame you for not building a time machine. For 1 day, the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank had tax payments backed up, while Microsoft's Hotmail email system briefly sent inaccurate dates reading 2099. But overall, both the government and private sector had detected and organized around the problem early enough to bring most vital systems up to date before the millennium turnover. While exact numbers are hard to determine, it's estimated that the U.S. government and American corporations spent a combined $100 billion on Y2K compliance in the 1980s and 90s. And those numbers don't account for unknown costs like human labor, replacements for old equipment, and marketing campaigns to spread awareness. Programmers and technologists were so effective at blunting the worst impacts of Y2K that some Americans assumed the entire crisis was a hoax from day one. But though the problems were overblown by the media, the situation did require a lot of human effort to solve. When the Senate Special Committee on the Year 2000 Technology Problem formally disbanded in February 2000, Chairman Bob Bennett emphasized this point, thanking the IT staffers who did all the hidden work at fixing the bug and keeping things moving in the U.S. government, calling the result the best-case scenario. It's also likely that the Y2K crisis helped New York prepare for the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Many of the city's transportation and communication systems were vital that day in coordinating first responders and managing disaster relief efforts. If these systems hadn't been retrofitted and updated so recently, they might not have held up to the strain of the 9/11 response. So rather than an embarrassing case of public hysteria, Y2K might be better remembered as one of the greatest catastrophes that never happened. So what do you think? Do you remember the Y2K panic? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.